Welcome to my PowerPoint on the UFO50 Connected Universe. Now, I've had this idea for a few months at least, and I just had no idea how to make this into like a proper video, so I just decided to steal the PowerPoint slide idea from that balatro YouTuber, and so we're going with that. Hope you enjoy it. Nonetheless, even if it's derivative. So, what are the ground rules that make something canon is the first thing you gotta set out if you're gonna see how all the games connect. So, it's pretty simple for me. If it's published by Mossmouth, I'm considering it canon. That doesn't inherently mean it's in the same universe as something else, but, anything that happens in it is true. It's real, they happened. So, what makes something as part of the same universe? If we see any characters or items or whatever cross over, unless it's being explicitly stated as a non-canon, we can take that as a connection. A simple example is Meat Boy is in Spelunky HD. Even if that's a bit confusing, Meat Boy in some sense exists in the Spelunky universe. Now, do note that even though a game may cross over into a different studio's game, I'm not going to count that game as definitely connected in universe. My easiest example is Spelunky and Meat Boy. Guy Spelunky is there, but I have no reason to believe that he canonically went and I don't remember what his abilities were on Meat Boy, but I don't believe that happened. It's much more likely to be a Smash Bros type situation where it's just for fun. If you did, I think you could probably link most games that have ever been made together as canon, so I just think that's a bit silly. But if you have any other questions about my choices, just feel free to ask. So, what do we have before UFO50 came out? Unsurprisingly, before Spelunky 2, we had absolutely nothing. But in Spelunky 2, we got Pilot. He's arguably the face of UFO50, he's the pilot of the Campanella series, and he's an unlockable spelunker in Spelunky 2. He's found in a test tube in the alien mothership on 5-1, and as with other spelunkers, he's playable in future runs. This was our first real taste of lore, if nothing else, of the Campanella series, mainly just given through base camp dialogue. He brings up his sister, Isabel, when talking to Demi Von Diamonds, as I have on the bottom. He also discusses how she likes treasure, which we later learn is kind of just what both of them do. They're both just into that. He does discuss Zoldath as well. I think that's our first mention of it before this point. And also, in the top right, you can see I have a photo of Liz taking a photo of the dead ghost of Pilot, which, fun fact, gave us our first image, maybe ever, of Pilot Quest, because that is Pilot's death sprite from Pilot Quest. That's just a fun fact, doesn't really mean anything. So, continuing on though, Spelunky 2 also has some connections to other games, even besides UFO50 though. As far as this slideshow is concerned, it's still under the Mossmouth branding though. First, and unsurprisingly, Spelunky HD is connected to 2. It's got tons of recurring characters and whatnot. They're sequels. I mean, it's not really that deep. As for Classic, though, that's an interesting case. From both a Reddit post that will be linked in the description, as well as a journal entry from the Spelunky 2, we know that Spelunky Classic is connected through a parallel universe to Spelunky 2. So that's cool. We now know that there's a parallel universe version of HD and 2, probably, but there's more. There's more to it. And you know that. So I realized this at 1 AM, that every single UFO50 game that we know, that we learn, I suppose, is connected to Spelunky through however many degrees of separation, they all have a parallel universe counterpart that are made of these large flat blocks of colors instead of whatever they're actually made of in universe. I guess it would be like that universe is what we see, and it would just be even chunkier if we somehow played those versions. I don't know. Either way, I guess that's interesting. But yeah, as far as the coherent explanation goes, we're just going to have a secondarily connected alternate universe version of any game, like I said, that is connected to Spelunky in the following slides. And they're all just going to be under that icon I have at the bottom, this Alt UFO50. It's going to be counted properly. I just don't have... I don't care to, to make the slide have all however many games are connected twice. And then also give them a little green indicator to show that they're a counterpart. So I hope that's okay. Back on track. Post UFO50, now in September, most, if not all games, are connected, but there is a line between reference and connection. This doesn't come up too often, but, for example, in Planet Zoldath, there's an Easter egg that directly mentions Velgress. However, in context, it is just meant as a reference to some real life, in UFOsoft lore, banter between Jerry Smolsky, who I typoed, and Benedict Chun, since they were both directing these games separately, but at the same time. However, as I said earlier, if a character, place, or significant object appears within multiple games, and it's not explicitly stated to not be canon, which none of them are, then I'm going to consider that a connection. So, my example down here is just called Poly. A lot of people have seen this one, if you've played a decent bit of it. So, basic connections. A lot of these games are straight up sequels, or at least share a main character, so I'm just gonna lump them together right off the bat. I don't really need to explain that, I hope. And there are some games that you may know are connected in a variety of pretty obvious ways if you actually get into them, but for now, I'm gonna leave them unboxed, unlinked, whatever. We just have Mortal and its sequel together, Velgress and Overworld together, because same main character, and of course all the pilot stuff, which is directly connected to Spelunky 2, which is connected to HD, which is connected to Classic, and Alt 2, and Alt HD, and I guess the Alt pilot games. So that is a total, though, of 105 games, with 17 of them being connected. And now we get to start linking. So obviously, you start with the pilot, because that has just, it's everywhere, you have to. Main connections, as previously mentioned, you got all the just obvious sequels tied together. I completely left out Big Bow Racing here, but obviously, yes, that's there too. Planet Zoldath, which is interesting, because even before UFO50 came out, people were pretty certain that it was the origin of Pilot and Campanella, and then it was later confirmed, once we actually got access to the game, to be the same people. Same ship, same whatever. But now, for the interesting stuff. So, first, Crash Landing at the end of Campanella 3 may be the vaguely UFO-shaped area in Barbuda, which I have in the top right. I kind of struggle to see it, but they tie in later regardless, so I don't know. That's more of a question for the lore heads, which I guess I am as well, but I'm not here to discuss that at the moment, so I'm not going to continue discussing it. Planet Zoldath's blue mustached creatures are a bug from Bug Hunter. Umbrellas, which are the purple guys in Campanella 1, are enemies in Mintech. The demon Chalkus in Planet Zoldath is mentioned in Planet Zoldath, is the antagonist of Mortal and Velgress, so I kind of feel obligated to just link those as well right off the bat. I usually save most of the inter-game links for later, but I'll make an exception here. The Mantis of Campanella 2 is hatched in Mooncat. A worm in Block Koala mentions seeing a UFO fly overhead. Galfaria shows a crashed Campanella on the far right of the overworld. Onion Delivery has many links, but the most obvious in my opinion is Zoldath being shown in the ending as a vacation destination. The purple turrets and Caramel appear in Campanella 2. Somehow, the Campanella is in Party House. It's very small there for some reason, if you buy enough house upgrades, which is really hard, by the way. It's like a lot of house upgrades. You gotta probably do a custom scenario. Another crashed Campanella shows up in Divers. A mysterious pink UFO is mentioned in the opening to Rock On Island. And the ending to Campanella 3 also looks pretty similar to the island, so either way, it's probably connected. If you idle in pin golf, the Campanella scrolls across the bottom of the screen. The Campanella appears in Fist Hell as an enemy, and it's mostly harmless. Pilot is seen in the audience of Hyper Contender. The Hive enemies in Campanella 2 likely appear in Rakshasa, and definitely in Star Wars Spear. Albeit in Rakshasa, they have 2 eyes, but, I mean, look at the hives, look at how they move if you've played the games. They're just, they're almost certainly the same thing. And for the record, they also appear in Moltol, but there's the second one specifically, but that doesn't really matter. That's not it though. There's more. Pilot, among others, are betters in Quibble Race. Notably, Quibbles were also first shown in Big Bug Racing, but I'm trying to keep this generally chronological in the order of games. Campanella 3 kind of made it weird with Barbuda, but it's whatever. Lastly, the Campanella makes its final chronological appearance in UFO50 as a mini-boss in Stage 3 of Seaside Drive. So we got our initial connections. This already links a lot of UFO50 together, which is pretty unsurprising, honestly. Pilot is just, he's an icon. And it just so happens that they were reusing a lot of assets in-universe throughout these games, so it just kind of led to these things being linked. It links, I say almost half, I think it does link half, maybe even a little bit more, together. And since they're all just directly connected, they're, to the Campanella series, they're all indirectly connected to each other. So in total, we now have 59 connected games, 5 being of the Spelunky series. That makes 27 normal games, if you're curious. Now, I feel like the most interesting linkage to continue from here, that's also chronologically fitting, is the Barbuda connections. We all know, first of all, that this is where the running theme of Egg started, and honestly, that could link, quite a few games together. But for the sake of argument, I'm gonna just act like that's not necessarily a connection. I feel like it's more of a theming than it is a connection, in my opinion. But regardless, so, could tie Mooncat in with that, but let's argue about it anyways. Look a little deeper. Mooncat is explicitly stated in the history to be a spiritual sequel to Barbuda, which, once again, does not overtly tie them together. You can be a spiritual sequel without being tied into the game, but it almost certainly is connected because one of the egg's contents, as well as some smaller details, which I will mention in the coming slides, make it very obvious that they are tied together quite closely. Specifically, the yellow egg has a sword and shield befitting a gallant knight. It looks to have corroded a fair bit. Now it's good for naught. Although I will note, the shield, I don't recall Mr. Barbuda having a shield, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not able to tell. But for some more solid connections, enemies, we have ghosts and mushrooms, both quite similar. Ghosts literally follow the same actions, they have a very similar sprite. The mushrooms in Mooncat work a little different because they jump when Mooncat jumps instead of passively just jumping around the room. But most notably, in my opinion, and what I feel like just undeniably connects them, is the Barbuda starting room that you come across on the main path to just the basic egg that most people get. And moreover, I didn't have this in this slide, but if you go to a warp on, I believe, the next screen, it will actually take you back a room into this one, but it will make the space, it won't fill it in, but it will make the space for the Barbuda that is normally at the top of that screen. So, that connects Mooncat and Barbuda undeniably. Most people probably already knew that, but still. Let's lump them together going forward. They're just going to be in a box. But then, moreover, within Divers, which this is also probably obvious if you've beaten Dairos. In order to get the chair, you need to find these 3 emblems. One is the head of the knight from Barbuda, and the other is literally just Mooncat. And the last one is Dylan's head from Dairos, so that one doesn't really matter. But in addition to that, a spotted egg, like the rest of these games, can be found in the depths alongside the egg items you purchase, so another interesting tie together. Final boss also hatches a one-eyed beast out of itself after being defeated, which looks very similar to the final boss of Barbuda. The only difference, besides color, is that weird scar on the right side of its face. Last but not least, though, which I feel like really ties them together, is that they're all games directed by Thorsten Petter, which is definitely a very notable member for being very strange in a lot of his design. Very, very cryptic, very mysterious, you know. It is noted that he has had borderline prophetic dreams in the past. Maybe. It's debated in the lore. And often has this theme of Semper Renasci, or Forever Reborn, throughout his games, especially this trilogy, obviously. If it is typically believed that Mooncat is after Barbuda, Divers, I guess, is after Mooncat, or it could be before, but it's definitely before Barbuda. Either way, they link together in a myriad of ways. How the time cycle works exactly, who knows? It's possible that he had these things planned from the start, but if we're being realistic, if we're keeping things non-supernatural, I guess, he probably just added it for fun in his later works. Who knows? It could just be completely normal. But either way, though, that now gives us a solid basis to link out from. Surprisingly, though, the only link that I could find out of these 3 games is via Grimstone. When you're relatively late into the game, you will enter this spirit realm, which has a rare enemy that you can encounter, Mooncat. He looks different, he's on the right. He shares the same sprite as another rare enemy, the Jump Bean, which obviously based off the Jumping Bean. I don't know if this actually gives any revelation as to what Mooncat is. I always thought he was a sweet potato. I don't know where I heard that first, but that's what I heard. Either way, it doesn't really matter, though. Could just be explained as a shared sprite as well. Who knows? Either way, though, this gives us a way into a new game entirely that we can continue to branch out from, starting with Grimstone. Now, unsurprisingly to probably a lot of people, it's no coincidence that we've got 2 cowboy-based games in this collection. While it's not immediately obvious, if you have beaten Rail Heist and paid attention, or played a bit of Rail Heist and happened to pick Maria as a party member and did most of Grimstone, then you will know that these 2 games are connected. Firstly, if you have beaten Rail Heist, you'll know that Maria, the blue cowgirl, heads to a town named Pleasant in the end. That alone ties them together, but if there was any doubt, when you're in one of the very late game dungeons in Grimstone, she'll also recognize Mr. Blue, which is her host, in a certain encounter. So that does give us another way out into Rail Heist. And I'm not gonna lump it as the same situation as the Barbuda trilogy thing that they have going on. I don't really feel like they're linked together enough. I don't really feel like they're sequel-like. They're just both cowboy games, and they share a character. And at least to some degree a setting. So, I'm just gonna consider them like, it doesn't change the count, doesn't really matter. Also, the demons are the same as from Devolution, so that's another link. Now, Rail Heist is what really gets us somewhere big, specifically into Mini and Max. Although, there is definitely other ways to get here, I just found this one to be pretty fun. Pretty early into the game, you can get into a toy train, which just so happens to contain some Rail Heisters. Obviously, these are almost definitely not our protagonists, they don't look the same, they don't seem to have the same goals. I don't know, I don't think they're the same. There is the question of how did they get here? It's probably not important, honestly, but I think they were either shrunk down to the same manners of everyone else, maybe a very long time ago, whenever Rail Heist took place, or they're just people who got shrunk down more recently, and, or maybe even more bonier, I don't know, and they got inspired by a real heist story. Anything's possible. Either way, though, that doesn't really matter. Point is, they're here, and Minion Max is a huge link to have. And we're going to have a lot of connections through Minion Max, or indirectly, through our next key game. Arguably, Party House is even bigger, but it goes very much hand in hand with Minion Max in terms of importance. As most of you have probably already heard by now, Party House takes place during Minion Max. Same time, same place. This can be seen in a couple of ways, but the most obvious is the Muffled Party House soundtrack playing when you're at normal size in Minion Max, as well as the ending having various party guests from that game. Which, this also gives us the name for the host that is seen in the credits of Party House. It's just Minnie's big sister, Amy. Amy herself is actually what provides most of the connections, with one main exception. So, let's get to those links. Amy is a playable character in Fistel. Amy is a playable character in Hotfoot. Amy is mentioned in the intro to Night Manor with her being out of line at a party. And the alien VIP in Party House is seen in the background of Hyper Contender. So that's 4 more games on top of everything we just went over. So let's show the updated links. So yeah, we have a lot more. As you can see, I've lumped Mabuda and the gang all together in one, and then all this nice little interlinkage over here on the right now, on top of everything we already had. And just a little disclaimer going forward, I will be using different colors, because things are going to start getting complicated. There's going to be overlappings. It's, you know, it's better to not just use black when things start overlapping, obviously. And now it's time for a lightning round. We're going to do a bunch of connections between all the games that we already have down just for fun. So, Ninpek's final boss is also the final boss of Seaside Drive, as well as being present in Fist Hell. Alpha Braz and Woogie all appear as betters in Cribble Race. I mispronounced it and I feel bad now. Rakshasa's green guys that hatched from the eggs originally came from Velgrass, although they aren't an enemy in Rakshasa, curiously enough. The blue flower from the intro of Star Wars appears on the wallpaper of Minion Max. Guy Spelunky appears in the audience of Overbold. Bug hunting services from Bug Hunter, obviously, are advertised in Onion Delivery, technically adding a new one, but it's the first one. I forgot to say it earlier. Basically, Whoop Tank features the same capsule things that we see in Mooncat's first stage. Chalkus is mentioned in Onion Dell, and thus linking it to Alpha's collection and Motul. The Moldocs in Minion Max share a striking similarity to Woogie, as well as being the fungus in the tea in Night Manor. Not that the latter is a new link, I just thought it was a cool detail and I wanted to point it out. And Mayor Speck of Fistel might be the owner of the titular Night Manor of Night Manor. And since they're already indirectly linked, I might as well throw it in there. So yeah, it got a fair bit more complicated. We do now, interestingly, have 2 ways into Spelunky through the entirety of UFO50, so that's fun. And now let's start branching out again. At this point, there's really not much else to do, so just start connecting every game that we can, because there isn't that many more games. So, Oppies from Magic Garden appear in Minion Max and Elphazar's Hat. Thus, Minion Max goes into Magic Garden goes into Elphazar's Hat. Paint Chasers from Paint Chase appear in Elphazar's Hat. I forgot earlier, but Alpha is in Pin Golf. Vishmi's the main character of Pogi's son, Chandar, is playable in Hotfoot. There's an Tactics Invincible Grunt Face when you photograph a screen on Dino Planet in Caramel. A combatant appears in Minion Max, and on top of that, an animal in the dirt near a key in Night Manor. And notably, there is a unique key that only appears once around the overworld map in Combatant, while many other small detail background things repeat, so needless to say they're linked. Also, if the Campanella and Big Bell in Campanella 3 do crash onto Rock On Island, then Barbuda and the gang thusly take place on that island. Lastly, Avianus and Cyber Owls take place in the same world due to Stagnar being mentioned in Cyber Owls, which is one of the gods in Avianos. Not that any of those last 2 are connected to the rest. So, purely in UFO50, we have 41 games interconnected. one isolated coupling of Avianos and Cyberelves in here, and then 7 completely isolated games. Now, stepping beyond the binds of UFO50, Spelunky is directly connected in a couple manners through Pilot and Overbold specifically, and as a refresher, due to Classic Guy's existence in Spelunky 2, we thus know that there is a parallel universe, and thus, every game connected to Spelunky has a duplicate game. It's not a game technically, but you know. All under Alt UFO50. And now, let's tally everything up. So the final count is 87 interconnected games ranging from Barbuda to Rakshasa to Paint Chasers. And, canonically, Mooncat could be the version of Mooncat that looks like roughly what we see on the screen. 2 pairs of games across parallel universes, 14 completely isolated experiences, with Waldorf being alone in all universes. And, in total, if you're paying attention, that adds up to an unsurprising count of 105 total games, generally linked to UFO50. So thank you very much for watching. This was, as I said, I had this idea for months. I just did not know how to do this in a video. And I've wanted to make some UFO50 content for a while, which is probably not surprising if you happened to watch those videos, or maybe even found me through them, I don't know. If there's any connections that I missed in this, which I guarantee it, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. I had a fair amount of knowledge myself, and a lot of help from the UFO50 lore doc, but I think it's inevitable that either I, or the lore doc, or both of us missed something. So, once again, unsurprisingly, tell me. I want to hear. I'm clearly interested in this. I will note, though, I don't consider terminal stuff to be canon to the game worlds, so thus there is at least one code that would add to a game to the interlinkage if I did consider it, but I'm not. I think it was just for fun in universe and IRL. I also think it would definitely get really weird if we did consider terminal codes, because that means a certain secret thing that I'm not going to mention would also add a lot of weirdness, and I don't even want to think about how that would connect in universe, so I'm not going to. And I am probably going to make more videos like this at some point. If you want to encourage me, feel free to show some support however you want to. While researching this, I had some ideas that were quite interesting just by looking through that lore doc. So I certainly have the formulations of a plan, if nothing else. But yeah, I think that's everything. Once again, if you want to show that you enjoyed this, do whatever you want, however you want. I don't care that much. And yeah, I will see you next time, I suppose. Goodbye.